Hello guys, welcome to the Inspiration and Enlightenment Slow Talk. This episode is a part of the series in which I compare enlightenment and psychology. Today I'm going to talk about self-consciousness. When I talk about self-consciousness, that's the same thing as self-awareness or the ego, or what I sometimes call the avatar, the self-consciousness of our current incarnation. Before I go into that, please allow me to show you a graph. This is the enlightenment psychology graph I use. On the top you see the higher self, which is the single self, cosmic self of mankind. There is only one, and in various religious and spiritual traditions it's known under many names. In Christianity it's Christ, in Hinduism it's Krishna, in Egyptian pantheism it is Horus. So the higher self is like a sun that emits countless light rays, and these light rays are souls. So what you see below the higher self, the soul, that is already an individual emanation of the higher self, and that's what we really are. We are these individual emanations of the higher self. We are individual, but we are not separate from the heart of mankind. Then what you see below the soul, the intellect, the desires, the mind, brain and body, this is then the individual personality that belongs to the body-mind vehicle, or it's part of our spacesuit, so to say. Okay, so desires and intellect are two in separate spheres, as well as the mind. The avatar is the self-consciousness of our current incarnation. It resides in the mind mostly, but it can also move around. Our mind has its own subconsciousness and is connected to the brain awareness, which again has its own subconsciousness, which steers, for example, the functions of the body. Okay. The most important thing to take away from this graph is that the mind is independent of the brain. In fact, it resides in another dimension or universe, the astral universe, and that's why when the body dies, the mind carries on to live, and we can continue to function in the in-between life, which is the astral universe. And the strongest indications that this is true are near-death experiences, when the consciousness carried on while the body was already dead. The big difference between psychology and enlightenment is that psychology is concerned with the avatar, the mind, the brain awareness, the physical subconsciousness, as well as biological mental modes. It does not move to the spheres which are above the avatar, and that's exactly what enlightenment does. So what is self-consciousness exactly? Well, it's the thing that wakes up in the morning. Yeah, that's our avatar, but it's much more than that. Yeah, our awareness is actually the soul. As I mentioned before, the soul is an individual emanation of the higher self. This is our true self-consciousness. The problem is that it is fluid and it moves around, and it is a shapeshifter, and it identifies itself with the vehicles it inhabits. Okay. So what happens when we wake up? Okay. When we wake up, our soul or our self-consciousness is sucked down into our body-mind vehicle. And the first thing it does, it identifies itself with the avatar, the mind, and the mixture. It's a mixture of mind, brain awareness, our avatar, which is conditioned by our astrological makeup, and the thoughts and desires and feelings it has accumulated during this life. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mess, actually. And as I said before, it keeps shifting and moving around depending on what is going on. And the most important thing we need to understand and recognize are exactly these shifts. Okay? So when you are focused on a task or concentrating, you will notice or you will feel that your avatar, your self-awareness, is here behind your eyes. And if you think too much, what will happen is you will get headache exactly here or below the eyes, because when you're focused on solving tasks, you're mostly using your eyes and easily strain your eyes. But if your grandchild comes running and jumps into your arm and hugs you, the self-consciousness straight away jumps down into your heart, and you will feel it there. When something sad happens, your subconsciousness will move to your throat and produce a lump there. Yeah. That's where most of your emotions and feelings reside, because at the well of the throat, that's where the Venus center is located. Okay. Modern psychology has found out that the nervous system of the body, which includes the brain, the spinal cord, and the other nerve centers which are arranged around the spinal cord, for example, the abdominal brain that resides at the solar plexus, that that our nervous system has sophisticated emotional modes that it can assume, and they are involuntary. So there's a fear mode, there is a disgust mode, there is a predator mode, there is a loneliness mode, and some others. And what happens is when these modes are triggered, for example, if somebody attacks us and our brain, our nervous system enters into the fear mode, involuntary, our self-awareness is sucked even deeper into these biological emotional modes. And these emotional modes, it's important to understand that these emotional modes have grown over millions of years. They are sophisticated and they are very strong and very hard to escape. But this is exactly what enlightenment will do. Yeah? It will try to sever you from these lower emotional modes like fear, disgust, predatory mode, and loneliness mode, and move the self-awareness higher and higher and higher until it reaches the higher self. And of course, it's not linear and it doesn't happen overnight. So the avatar will keep on shifting up and down, left and right, but it will do so less and less, and it will not move as deep as it did before. So what happens over time is that you will find that the self-awareness will have something like a lower limit, yeah? And so it will not go below this lower limit. It will still shift up and down, left and right, but it will somehow bounce from this lower limit. And maybe 10 or 20 years later, that lower limit has risen again, and will avoid that the self-consciousness and the soul will sink too deep. And this is how enlightenment works over a long time. It's a hilly area, but there is a slow, constant ascent. What happens when we sleep? When we sleep, our brain switches off and our avatar switches off as well. So our self-awareness, our soul, shifts upwards to the mind, which I explained earlier resides in the astral universe. And there a few things can happen. The first thing that can happen is that the soul will occupy itself with the things that go on in the mind. And that's what we know as normal dreams. Yeah? So if you dream about experiences you had during the day, or when your mind is mulling in your dream, is mulling over something that happened, or when it comes up with suggestion and messages, when your subconsciousness comes up with suggestion and messages how to deal with certain circumstances in your life, that's your soul moving within the mind. But because the soul, when the body sleeps, it's free from the body, it is also able to move sideways in its own dimension or universe. So it can go on a little journey. Yeah? It can do an astral journey, or it can do an astral projection. So this is the other kind of dream we have. It's a real life astral experiences. And it's important, it's good if you start distinguishing between these two kind of dreams. I believe there is a third set of dreams which I call creative dream. That's when the soul is imagining something and is creating something. I believe that's actually the state of the dream with the rapid eye movement. So again, three kind of dreams. The soul is mulling over experiences, conscious experiences it had. It goes on a little astral journey, or it starts imagining and creating things in the mind. Lastly, it can also move upwards and unite with the higher self, and that usually happens during deep sleep, when even our mind goes unconscious. And the reason why we don't recollect our soul and reuniting with the higher self for, I don't know, half an hour or an hour while we sleep, is because our brain awareness is not able to produce memories of such high state of mind. But our brain can be evolved to the point when it can memorize such higher states of mind. And that's one milestone of enlightenment called illumination, when the brain is evolved to the point that it can experience, recognize and realize the higher self. What happens when we die? Basically the same thing when we fall asleep. Yeah? The body dies, and with it the brain awareness dies, and also our avatar dies. Yeah? So, but the mind, which is the same thing as your astral body, does not die. So the soul retreats from the body into the mind. Yeah? And it will move with the mind, which is then its vehicle, becomes its vehicle, to a place in the astral universe where it is at home and where it resides between the in-between life. And there it can have experiences which are very similar to the experiences we have with planetary experiences, with the exception that it won't experience hunger, thirst, and sleep. Yeah. So it will be conscious all the time, and it will not feel any biological need as it does when it is incarnate. So last I want to talk about the rough evolution of our self-consciousness. So when we started out on this journey, we were still united with the higher self. We were residing within the sun of the higher self. And that was an unconscious union with the higher self. Now, the higher self needs self-conscious souls. And why does it need that? It wants to manage physical existence. So therefore, it emanates souls, and these souls incarnate, and through the incarnation, the process of incarnation and having experiences and being subjected to pain, suffering, lust, happiness, love, and all these things we experience, it creates this self-consciousness awareness. And this is very, very precious. The most precious thing in the universe. I know our ego is very often a jerk, and sometimes it's a criminal, and it's abusive, and sometimes it's perverted. It likes to get abused, and there are a lot of bad qualities the ego can assume. But still, it is very precious for the higher self. And the best way to think of the higher self, the preciousness of the higher self, is shown in the symbolism of the phoenix. Yeah, the bird, this wonderful, beautiful bird that lives, and then it burns into flames and dies and rises from its ashes. And this is exactly what we souls do. Yeah, we rise, we are born, we live a life, and we die, and we are born again, and we live, and we die, and we are born again. And this is quite a magical adventure. Okay? So a long time ago, when we started the cycle of incarnation, we got cut off from the higher self temporarily, in order to develop self-conscious awareness. But now our self-awareness is on the return. We return back to the union with the higher self, to conscious union. We came from an unconscious union with the higher self, and now we return to a conscious union with the higher self. And this is a great achievement. In fact, this is the greatest business in the universe. Another way of understanding the importance of all of this, the development of self-consciousness and the evolution of self-consciousness, is that, as I mentioned before, the higher self cannot directly act upon the physical plane. It cannot incarnate itself. That's why it produces souls. So in order to make an impact on the physical universe and planetary life, you need self-consciousness, and you need to go through experiences, and you need to develop skills using the spacesuit that we have. And we have that now. Yeah? We went through many lives, and we gained skills, and we had many experiences. Yes. So, but what will happen to our self-awareness or the avatar? The avatar will turn into a catalyst. Yeah. It will be a catalyst for the intentions of the higher self. Now that may sound a little scary, because a catalyst is really nothing. Who wants to be a catalyst, right? So, but remember that the lower ego, your avatar, does not really exist, which is the main tenet of Buddhism, by the way. The avatar is just a vehicle for your soul, for your true self-awareness, to function in the brain and to have planetary experiences. Okay? It is only because the soul identifies itself with the avatar and the mind and the body-mind vehicle, the body, that the avatar comes to life. So, but your true identity is your soul, or rather your higher self. So you do not lose anything. You gain. And what you gain is consciousness. Thank you for watching this episode of the Inspiration and Enlightenment Slow Talk. Please help spreading the light with a like and share, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Love and light.